originally planned to speak about animal hoarding, which, you know how some people collect records obsessively, or like plastic bags. Well, animal hoarding is like that, except with cats. But when I sat down to do the lecture, I realized I know nothing about animal hoarding, and so I thought I'd talk about something I do know about, and that's the sin of hubris. So I'm going to tell you a story, and that story focuses on two animals: the chimpanzee and a human toddler. The hubris in question belongs to this man, W.N. Kellogg. Now, Kellogg was a psychologist who is most known for a study that he conducted with his wife in the 1930s. And it was one of the first formal attempts to raise a chimpanzee in a human household as part of the family. Now, how did this study come about? Well, as a grad student, Kellogg had been reading about children who'd been abandoned and raised by wild animals. The most documented example around the time that he was doing his work involved these two Indian girls who'd been raised by wolves. And they acted like wolves, they moved like wolves. They never really acclimated to human ways of living. Of course, they died young, so it left open the possibility, well, maybe they just didn't have long enough in human civilization to adapt. So this just got Kellogg wondering, to what extent are humans shaped by the environment? Now, in his fantasies, I think that Kellogg really wanted to kind of replicate the feral child experience, but abandoning a baby in the woods was considered unethical. So what he did instead is to try to invert the experiment and to raise an ape wanted to raise an ape in the human environment. Okay, wait, I'm going back to that, okay. So Kellogg had a 10-month-old son at the time, Donald, and he somehow convinced his wife to let them to conduct the experiment themselves. So they got this 7.5-month-old female chimp, Gia, and they raised her alongside Donald in identical living conditions. Now, from the beginning, this study was controversial. Many of Kellogg's colleagues objected to using a human infant as an experimental subject. They thought the whole premise of the study was sensationalist, that it was publicity-seeking and stupid. But Kellogg went ahead and he very meticulously documented the similarities and differences between the two animals. Now what I'm going to do now is show a few of the similarities that he found. One is that they showed, both Donald and Gia showed a great deal of affection toward each other. They loved to hug, they loved to hold hands. I've got a little video here, the video quality is but as you can see, it's really cute. Now, Gia, the chimp, does tend to initiate the contact. She is usually the one that starts the hand holding. When Donald is sad and crying, she'd run up and hug him and that kind of thing. There's also just a little offside. Whenever somebody would be carrying Donald, she'd slap them. She's very protective. Okay, another similarity is both animals respond in a similar fashion to tickling. So there's Donald getting tickled, and then we're going to see Gia. And she's same thing, same response. See how it rolls up. It's hard to see on the screen, but both of them like to ride around in small vehicles. And both reacted, when they saw photos on a page in a book, they both reacted the same way. They tried to pick it up. If it was like a piece of food, they tried to pick it up and eat it, but they didn't really get that kind of two-dimensional representation. Now, up until the age of 2, Kellogg found that the chimp advanced mentally and physically faster than the boy. And I'll give you a few examples of that. There are many in the book, but I'll just give you a few. One involved the use of silverware and glasses and drinking out of glasses. Primates, including humans, are highly imitative. We learn by watching others. We learn basically by copying. And so what Kellogg would do is he would demonstrate how to drink from a glass and how to use a spoon. And Gia picked it up right away. You'll see right here, she no problem using a spoon. She eat her food with it. Can drink out of a glass. Donald, on the other hand, would watch them, and it took him months to get it right. Whoops. Another kind of example of Gia being more advanced was that she learned to walk sooner at a younger age. And this is an example here. Chimps usually don't walk on two legs. They do usually go on all fours. So this is an example of Gia being influenced by the human environment in which she was living. She would also, and I thought this was interesting, she would skip. She'd watch the neighborhood kids outside skip. And this is, again, not something that you see chimps do in the wild. Gia, another example, she responded to verbal commands at a younger age. So, you know, things like no, close the door, where's your nose? She understood these more quickly than Donald did. And there's a million examples in the book. These are just a couple. She was emotionally more mature. She was more cooperative and obedient. She acted a little bit more like an older child. After doing something, she would exhibit what they consider to be kind of apologetic behavior. She would, you know, if she'd throw things or make a mess or whatever, she'd run up to the Kellogg's and make this little kissy face and apologize. Now, what we don't learn from this study, or what we didn't learn from this study, is that humans' abilities surpass chimps around age 2. And the reason we don't learn that is because Kellogg discontinued the experiment when Donald was around that age. Now, why he stopped it is kind of an interesting question. Kellogg claimed that he ended the experiment because he accomplished what he set out to do. He determined that, yes, the environment is a factor. But there's a reason to believe that Kellogg wasn't really being upfront about this. Ultimately, the most noteworthy result of the study was not that environment matters, but something that Kellogg didn't really anticipate. And that is his son Donald started imitating the chimp. Now, in some cases, this is no big deal. Donald, he would climb furniture, he'd climb trees at a very young age. But other habits were more troubling. Now, Donald, you may remember, he's a few months older than Gia, and he had actually learned to walk shortly before they brought Gia into the household. But the more he hung out with Gia, the less he relied on walking. He kind of regressed and started crawling more. Donald would scrape his teeth against the window and door screens, which is something that Gia would do to irritate them. He would bite people. At 15 months, he bit the thigh of one of the Kellogg's so hard that it caused a mark. He would pick up crumbs from the tray table with his lips, and this was long after he learned how to use his hands properly. He'd carry small objects from place to place in his mouth. And at 18 months, he chewed up a shoe. But the most worrisome sign of all, arguably, is the fact that Donald's language skills were delayed. At 19 months, his vocabulary consisted of 3 words. Instead of talking, he would grunt and make chimp sounds. Now, all of this is mentioned in The Ape and the Child, and Kellogg's account of the study is in most places remarkably even-handed. In fact, he sometimes sounds so objective that you forget he's talking about his own son. But there is one exception, and that's when it comes to this imitative behavior, because every time Kellogg refers to his son copying the chimp, he speaks in euphemisms. So he'll refer to, for example, Donald's superior imitation abilities, or Gia's inferiority on this account. Of course, if you'll recall, and just another example of his language in the book is, this quote kind of stood out for me. Kellogg wrote, Donald's capacities astonished even those closest to him when he was vocally imitating his playmate. Now, this kind of makes it sound as if Donald is a bit of a genius, but what it actually refers to is this incident where Donald went and picked up an orange and brought it to one of the Kellogg's and goes, like in connection with the orange. So this experiment ended in 1932. Gia was returned to the Yerke Center in Florida. She died the following year of a respiratory infection, which is not uncommon. As for Donald, we don't know what became of his life, but when he was 43 years old, he committed suicide. The study got a lot of press when it was published, but Kellogg ended up deeply regretting it. Not so much because of what it did to his son, but because it prevented him from being taken seriously as a scientist. In closing, it's worth noting that variations in the study have been conducted repeatedly through the 20th century. There were a number of cases of people attempting to raise chimps in their homes. But to the best of my knowledge, no one ever tried to use a human infant as the control group again. That's the end.